The morning began like any other. A faint light slipped through the thin curtains, brushing softly against the worn wooden floor. The air was still, carrying the quiet weight of another ordinary day. For Elijah, mornings had long stopped feeling like beginnings. They felt more like continuations of struggle, of waiting, of unanswered prayers. He sat at the edge of his bed, staring at his hands. Rough, tired, empty. "Is this all there is?" he whispered under his breath. He had asked that question more times than he could count, and every time silence answered him. Elijah wasn't a man who had lived a grand life. No great achievements. No remarkable stories. No crowds that knew his name. He worked quietly, lived simply, and hoped, though even hope had begun to feel like a distant memory. To others his life looked small, but heaven was watching. The weight of the ordinary Elijah worked in a small repair shop at the corner of an old street. The paint on the sign outside had faded years ago, and the bell on the door rang with a tired sound each time someone entered. Most days, only a handful of customers came in. Some needed watches fixed. Others brought broken radios or old fans that had stopped working long ago. Elijah would take each item gently, inspect it carefully, and work with patience that most people had long forgotten. "Why do you even try?" one man once asked him. "It's just junk." Elijah had smiled faintly and said, "Maybe, but it matters to someone." The man laughed and walked away, but Elijah stayed. He stayed with the broken things, because somewhere deep inside, he understood what it meant to feel like one. A whisper unheard that evening, after closing the shop, Elijah walked home slowly. The sky was painted in shades of gold and purple, a quiet masterpiece that most people were too busy to notice. He paused for a moment and looked up. "God," he said softly, "do you see me?" The question lingered in the air. Cars passed by. People walked hurriedly. Life continued as if his words had never been spoken. He lowered his gaze. "I'm trying," he continued. "I really am, but it feels like nothing I do matters. My life is so small." A tear slipped down his cheek, but he quickly wiped it away. He wasn't expecting an answer. He had stopped expecting one a long time ago, but heaven had heard every word. The sacred in the small. The next day, something unusual happened. A young girl entered the shop, holding a small, broken music box. Her eyes were wide, filled with worry. "Can you fix this?" she asked. Elijah took the box carefully. It was old, delicate, and clearly treasured. "I can try," he said gently. "It was my mother's," she added. "She passed away last year. This is all I have left." Elijah felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just a broken object. This was memory, love, connection. This mattered. "I'll do my best," he said, his voice steady. The girl nodded and left. As Elijah worked on the music box, he realized how fragile it was. The smallest mistake could ruin it completely. Every movement had to be precise, careful, intentional. Hours passed. He adjusted tiny gears, cleaned delicate parts, and handled each piece as if it were sacred. And in that moment, without realizing it, he was doing something holy. Heaven's perspective, what Elijah didn't see, was what heaven saw. Every careful movement, every act of patience, every moment of quiet dedication. To the world, it was just a man fixing a small object in a forgotten shop. But to heaven, it was something entirely different. It was faithfulness. It was love in action. It was sacred. A voice, gentle, eternal, filled with truth, whispered in the unseen. "What you call small, I call sacred." The girl returned 2 days later. Elijah handed her the music box with a soft smile. "Try it," he said. She opened it slowly. For a moment nothing happened. Then music, soft, beautiful, alive. The girl's eyes filled with tears. "It works," she whispered. Elijah nodded. She looked at him, her voice trembling. "You don't understand. This means everything to me." But Elijah did understand, more than she realized. "Take care of it," he said. She hugged the music box close to her chest and left, her heart lighter than when she had entered. Elijah watched her go. For the first time in a long time, something stirred within him. Not pride, not accomplishment, but something deeper. Purpose. A shift begins that night. Elijah sat by his window looking out at the quiet street. Something felt different. The world hadn't changed. His circumstances hadn't improved, but something inside him had shifted. Maybe, he thought, maybe it does matter. He wasn't sure why. He couldn't explain it. But the small act of fixing that music box had awakened something he thought was gone forever. Hope. And in the stillness of the night, the whisper came again. You are seen. The hidden work of God. Days turned into weeks. Elijah continued his work, fixing watches, repairing radios, restoring broken things. But now he saw it differently. Every item had a story. Every repair had meaning. Every moment mattered. He began to approach his work with renewed intention, not because anyone noticed, but because he believed deep down that it was seen. And slowly something remarkable began to happen. People started returning, not just for repairs, but for him. They trusted him. They appreciated his care. They valued his presence. The small shop that once felt forgotten began to feel alive. The message revealed one evening as Elijah was closing the shop. An elderly man entered. I've heard about you, the man said. Elijah looked confused. About me? They say you fix things no one else can, the man smiled. Elijah shook his head. I just try my best. The man placed an old pocket watch on the counter. This belonged to my father, he said. It hasn't worked in years. Elijah picked it up carefully. I'll take a look, he said. The man nodded, then paused before leaving. You know, he added, it's rare to find someone who cares about the small things. Elijah stood still. Those words echoed in his heart. The small things. That night as he worked on the watch, the truth finally became clear. His life wasn't small. It had never been small. It had been sacred all along. God's voice in the quiet of that moment, Elijah felt it. Not as a loud sound, not as a visible presence, but as a deep, undeniable knowing. And the message came, you measure your life by what the world sees, but I measure it by what is done in love. You call it small, I call it sacred. Every act of kindness, every moment of patience, every unseen effort, I see it all, and nothing is wasted. Tears filled Elijah's eyes, not of sadness, but of understanding. A life transformed from that day forward. Elijah lived differently, not because his circumstances changed dramatically, but because his perspective did. He no longer saw himself as insignificant. He no longer believed his life lacked meaning. He understood that greatness isn't always loud. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it is hidden. Sometimes it looks like fixing a broken music box, or repairing an old watch, or simply showing up day after day with faithfulness. The final truth: years later, Elijah's shop became known throughout the town. People came not just for repairs, but for the peace they felt there, for the care, for the kindness, for the presence of something they couldn't quite explain. And Elijah, he never became famous. He never sought recognition. But he lived a life that mattered, a life that was seen, a life that was sacred. God's message today: if you feel like your life is small, if you feel unnoticed, if you wonder whether anything you do truly matters, hear this. Heaven sees differently. What you call small, heaven calls sacred. Your quiet efforts matter. Your unseen faithfulness matters. Your daily acts of love matter. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is forgotten. And you are seen.